Yeah.
So thank you all for coming out. As I said, this is going to be a conversation. These wheels are tough to get on, right? A conversation between me and the governor, then we're going to take questions from the audience. So first of all, Governor, like a debate or a town hall, give you a couple minutes just to kind of talk about your first term. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, well, good morning, everyone. And Shelley, just want to thank you. Want to thank King Randall and the fellows over there for coming up. It's great to see you guys. It's an honor to be here this morning. I just appreciate the time and the opportunity. You know, I've told a lot of people, really, especially in the last 24 hours, because I've had a pretty busy public schedule with events like this, and had a great one last night with several black radio hosts, and took every question they gave me. And I told them, I said, look, I've been so honored to be serving as your governor. And when I ran 2018, Marty and the girls and I, we stayed on that bus. We went to 91 counties in the last 3 weeks of the campaign. I'd already visited all 159, most of them multiple times. And I was just telling people, look, I'm going to put hardworking Georgians first, ahead of the status quo and the politically correct. And that's what I've done as your governor. But I also promised people, when I got sworn in January 2019, when Marty was holding the Bible, and she's here, our great First Lady's here this morning, you know, I told people after I took that oath in my speech that whether you voted for me or not, I was going to work hard every day on your behalf. And that's exactly what I've done. And I think people have seen that. I'm running on my record of, you know, being in the fight when we were having civil unrest in our state to protect our businesses and our government buildings and our capital city from literally being burned down from people, but also protecting the rights of those that were upset because they'd seen injustice with their own eyes. You know, protecting their right to peacefully demonstrate and let their voice be heard. And we did that during the COVID-19 pandemic by trusting you all more than the government. And I took a lot of criticism from people on both sides for the decisions I made to keep our economy open, to be the first state to reopen small parts of it that we had asked to shutter to help us stop the spread and flatten the curve and build PPE supply and hospital bed capacity. I took pressure from the national media, from the local media, from healthcare pundits that were in their basement. But you know what? I've been in that situation before. Marty and I both have as small business owners for over 35 years where you're not sure if you're going to make it to the next week. You're not sure if you're going to be able to pay the folks that you've been working with for a decade to build your business, and you hadn't even been able to pay your suppliers, and that's a bad feeling. And there was a lot of Georgians feeling like that. So when I was getting all that pressure, I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to those hardworking Georgians that were telling me, look, I can't keep doing this. Barbers, cosmetologists, restaurant folks, a lot of other people that weren't working. And that hit home with me, and that's who I was fighting for. And I think people saw that. I think people saw during the 2020 election. I mean, that was a very polarizing moment in our country's history and certainly in our state's history. But I did exactly what I told people I would do. I put my hand on that Bible. I promised you I'd protect the laws and the Constitution of this state and the Constitution of the United States, and that's exactly what I did. Now, I know everybody out there doesn't agree with everything I've done. Marty tells me that all the time, so does our 3 daughters. But at least people know that I have fulfilled my promises that I ran on in 2018, things like strengthening rural Georgia, having innovative health care plans, making sure that people have economic opportunity no matter what their zip code or what neighborhood they grew up in, focusing on rural broadband, you know, a host of other things, keeping people safe, going after street gangs. You know, I got ridiculed by some in the media for even talking about going after street gangs in 2018 because people said there's no data to prove all this. Now every day they're writing about gangs shooting people in our neighborhoods, and we're doing something about that. And we have been. Chris Carr announced yesterday a huge gang indictment case in Athens, Clark County, because we have local prosecutors that don't want to go after the gangs. But this year we fix that and allow our Attorney General to do so when they won't. And I have a commitment to keeping people in this state safe. And it's not our job to be doing a lot of the things that we're doing, But when you have 3 kids like we do, and you're worried about sending your kids to the gas station or to the mall, we need to be in the fight, and we're doing it. And thankfully now the City of Atlanta Police Department is in the fight with us. We're working with a lot of other locals. We partner with people in Columbus and Savannah and Macon, and we'll do that anywhere we need to keep people safe. But I also believe in giving people opportunity, even those that have made mistakes. And we have a great record of that here in our state. And that's really why I'm running for re-election. Marty said, "Why, after all you've been through, why do you want to do this?" And I said, because we live in the greatest state in the country to live, work, and raise our families. I believe that now, even after all we've been through. I mean, look, COVID was hard on everybody. What we've been through financially, from the virus, the disease that affected our family, we experienced loss. Just about every Georgian did, probably every Georgian did. But our people were resilient. And they were resilient because we gave them the opportunity to do that. You know, we didn't do like other states where you had a governor, Shelley, that would not allow you to get up and go to work every day. They would not allow you to put your kids in the classroom every day. They wanted to decide whether you wear a mask or whether you get a vaccine. You know, we didn't do that in Georgia. We trusted the people more than the government. And I think that's a big contrast in this campaign, because my opponent, she criticized me for all those things. But that's the record I'll run on, and that's what I'm doing. And I'd be honored to have y'all's vote and support, and I'm glad you're here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Of those things you mentioned, what do you think is would you say was the most important of those accomplishments that you had in your first term? What was the most important thing to you?
Well, people ask me about, you know, what's the signature thing that you've done, and it's not really anything that I've done. Listen, we have great legislative partners. I like to give them a lot of credit, because I can't just do these things unilaterally. You know, this is not a dictatorship. This is a three-legged stool government that we have, and we have a great team in the General Assembly that's partnering with us to have our business environment be great, and, you know, work on a lot of the different things that we've done over the years. And obviously a lot of that's been my agenda, but we've also worked on a lot of things that were their agenda. And I think when you look back at some of those policies, you know, most of them had broad bipartisan support. You think about the Mental Health Parity Act that we passed this year, probably one of the greatest pieces of legislative work that I've seen, the process that went through the House, then the Senate. You know, our office's collaboration with both bodies and both parties brought, you know, I think complete unanimous support. And it's something we needed to do, and we did that in our state. But I think the thing that I'm most proud about is how resilient our people are. It's not necessarily any one thing that I did, but it's just how resilient people in our state have been to fight through all that we've been through, and really to have our state in such a great position, Shelley. I mean, we got lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state, most people ever working in the history of the state, 2 record years of economic development in a row. But, you know, the other thing is elections are about the future. And, you know, what I've said and what I've done, I think people appreciate that, and they want to know that you've been working for them, but they also want to know, you know, what about the future? And I think that's something, quite honestly, Republicans hadn't done a great job of in past elections. It's saying, you know, what are we for? What are we going to be fighting for the next 4 years? And I can tell you what I'm going to be fighting for is to help Georgians fight through 40-year high inflation, a disaster at the gas pump, and quite honestly, bad policies in Washington that have gotten us in this place. I mean, I read this morning, there's a report out in August, 60% of Americans are living week to week. 71% of them don't feel like their wages are keeping up with the rate of inflation. And that's directly tied to the policies of, I think, Joe Biden and Stacey Abrams. I mean, she supported the policies that he's taken to Washington, D.C. to raise taxes on people, to spend more money, even when we're in an inflationary environment. You know, disastrous domestic energy policy that's driven gas prices up. I mean, even though they're down now, it seems like there's relief, but it's still much higher than it was when Joe Biden came into office. And my focus in the second term is going to be helping Georgians fight through that. We suspended the gas tax again a few days ago to continue to keep a little more money in the pockets of hardworking Georgians. We sent tax money back to them last year instead of spending it on big government projects and programs. That sounds really good, but when you use that one-time money up, the choice that's left is you either got to cut government programs like education, health care, public safety, or you got to raise everybody's taxes. And that's not a place I don't want to do either one of those things. I want to keep lowering taxes and fully fund our core government programs. And that's what we've done in the state, and that's what we want to do in the future. We got a plan to continue to drive our tax rates down. We're going to do another tax rebate, and we're going to do a one-time property tax relief grant. Because most Georgians I'm talking to that own their home, their property taxes are going up. Their assessment's gone up. Not all their locals are rolling back the millage rate to offset that increase. And we're going to do a one-time grant to help people fight through that. We believe it'll save the average homeowner between 15 and 25% on their tax bill.
Going on to the next question, because you answered the future. That was my next question. What are some things you want to work on? That's fine. On the issue of abortion, Democrats are making a big issue, choice versus pro-lifers. What is your stance on abortion?
Well, the reason that the Democrats are making that a big issue is because they don't want to talk about what I've been talking about, and that's 40-year high inflation, disastrous domestic energy policy, high gas prices, a disaster at the border, where literally every governor in the country is dealing with fentanyl, overdoses, and deaths in our country, many of them African Americans. They don't want to talk about those issues because they know they have not been there. The fixes to these problems are not that difficult. And the Republican governors, quite honestly, have come out with solutions to many of those problems. We just have an administration that doesn't want to listen to those. And so they're trying to distract with the whole, pro-life abortion issue. My stance on this has been very clear. And listen, I understand Georgians disagree on this issue. There's some people that love the heartbeat bill. There's some people that detest it. There's other people that think it didn't go far enough. I mean, to me, that's all baked in. The difference is people know where I've been, Shelley. I've been consistent on that issue. We passed the heartbeat bill 3 years ago. The question is, where is Stacey Abrams on this issue? She's been pro-life. She was then for late-term abortions, and then when she realized the polling was looking bad on that issue, she moved back to a different place, and then after that she went back to saying it should be between the doctor and the patient, which basically would allow partial birth abortions or even abortion after the child is born. And I just do not support that. But even if people disagree on this issue, there's so many issues dealing with life that we all agree on that we have also worked on. And you never hear the other side talking about adoption reform, foster care reform. We've done both of those things in our state. We have made it more affordable for Georgians to adopt. We have reformed the foster care system. We are giving a better reimbursement rate that was literally celebrated across the state from foster parents to help them fight with 40-year high inflation so that we can have more of our kids into a loving home. And look, we have problems that we've still got to continue to work on, and we have more work to do. But Marty Kemp has done more than anyone in the country to raise the awareness on human trafficking, to that evil crime, and making sure that we end that and that we go after the perpetrators. We have passed 7 pieces of bipartisan legislation to protect those innocent lives, many of them children. And we've also passed legislation to make sure that we're supporting the victims. You know, when you're at home on Friday night and your wife gets a call because there's a trafficking victim that's been recovered and there's nowhere to put that child, that is heartbreaking. Well, she has not put up with that. She has demanded that we fix that problem, and we're building a receiving center right now. We've supported other organizations in our state that have built tiny homes and other things with wraparound services. And you never hear the other side talking about that. But I believe life is about a lot of other things as well. You think about what we did in 2019. I ran on protecting our schools and making sure our kids and our teachers were going to be safe in the classroom. Long before this last conversation about that issue came up with horrific events around the country. We did $30,000 school security grants to every single school in the state. We gave them complete local control to harden and protect their buildings, depending on which building it was, in which system, in which neighborhood, in which county, in which state, or which city. And we gave them the ability to do that. So like, we did those things before a lot of these issues happen, and we're committed to doing that again. But I think it just shows what our values are. Even if you may disagree on, when it would be inappropriate to have a legal abortion or not, you can agree that this is a state that protects life in many ways, and that's what I'm committed to do in the future. But again, the campaign is about the future. We passed the heartbeat bill 3 years ago. My focus in this campaign is helping Georgians fight through 40-year high inflation, high gas prices, the fentanyl that's coming across from a porous southern border, and helping people fight through Joe Biden wanting to raise your taxes when in the state of Georgia we're trying to lower them.
Speaking of Ms. Abrams, Fair Fight just lost a court case, went on for, I think, a year and a half.
4 years.
4 years, 4-year court case. Many people said she was a real governor. They started the lawsuit. Federal judge appointed by President Obama, ruled against them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's great that the truth is out. I mean, that's what I've been promoting ever since I've been Secretary of State, quite honestly. One of the challenges I had in 2018 that we had to overcome, and thankfully we did, because I was labeled a racist and a voter suppressor when I was Secretary of State. If you remember back to the 2018 election, I had a really tough primary, got in the runoff, had a really tough runoff, came out of that broke. Stacey Abrams didn't have any of that. She had more money than you could imagine at the time, which is just half of what she's raised now. But she also had the national media that helped define me, really with a bunch of lies, quite honestly. And it was hard fighting through that. But the thing that's different in 2018 is I have a record. And people know what that record is. And they know that in 2018, we had the highest African-American turnout in the country in a governor's race, in 2018. And we just saw that again in 2022 after we passed the Elections Integrity Act, after we saw mechanical issues in the 2020 election. And we had a lot of complaints about that. A lot of people had doubt about the confidence in the elections process. And there was a lot of really good bills that were dealing with that, and there were some bad bills that were dealing with that. But the bill that we ended up passing was a good bill that makes it easy to vote and hard to cheat. And that's exactly what happened in May of this year when we had the primary. We had record turnout in the Republican primary, and we had record turnout in the Democratic primary. In the lawsuit that Stacey Abrams filed right after she acknowledged that I had won the governor's race in 2018 and has cost you all, Georgia taxpayers, $6 million to defend, every single count was thrown out, every single one of them, because what she was saying was not true. And Judge Jones affirmed that. But what did happen was Stacey Abrams used this whole legal political maneuver to pad her own wallet, sow doubt in democratic institutions, and build her celebrity status. And thankfully the judge saw through that and made it clear to Georgians that here it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And I believe that's what you're going to see when early voting starts here in just a couple of weeks. In Georgia, it's going to be easy to vote, but it's also going to be a secure elections. And I believe that most Georgians want that. And the things that we took steps toward with Senate Bill 202 certainly do that. And the judge affirmed that in the past that we are not a suppressive state, as Joe Biden and the vice president said. And we've seen that with our numbers, quite honestly.
I know you personally. I know Mrs. Marty Kemp, First Lady, know the girls. You've been on our show many times. By the way, fellas, did I tell you I'm on WSB Radio, 95.5. 7 to 10, myself and Milani Kai. But you've been on the show several times. You brought up something they called you a racist, right? I know you. Many of these men have never met you. Answer that question, Well,
I remember being on, I think it was Young Jock's show one morning after the election bill came out. And I did a 30-minute segment with him and a few other folks, and I took every single question they threw at me about the elections bill. And the last question I got, they asked me, they said, you know, Governor, to be quite honest with you, there's a lot of our listeners, especially female listeners, that think you don't like black women. And I just kind of laughed at that, and I said, well, you know, I have a record to prove that that's not the case. And I kind of went through the historic minority appointments I've made of, you know, appointing a black female to the Court of Appeals, then promoting her to the Georgia Supreme Court, appointing the first black female and first African-American Superior Court judge in Gwinnett County, our Revenue Commissioner, our Georgia Technology Authority Commissioner or Director, our State Accountant. They all happen to be historic appointments that I made of African Americans that are now serving in that role in state government. So truly, if you look at our team, this is as diverse as our state is, and these are great leaders that are deserving to be in those prominent places, and they're leading one of the most efficient state governments in the country right now that's been innovating and using technology. And a lot of those people were with me, or have been for the last 10 years, as we revamp systems in the Secretary of State's office and use technology and innovation, not only to do a new voter registration system, but also a new corporate filing system and a lot of other things that are still serving our state very well. You know, I can't remember how many African-American judicial appointments I've made. I appointed the first Asian to the Georgia Supreme Court. I appointed our first ever constitutional officer that happens to be Hispanic or Latino, and John King, our insurance commissioner. I just appointed not too long ago Fitz Johnson's a African-American business guy to the Public Service Commission, so he's serving our statewide right now. Fitz is a great guy, great part of our business environment. I appointed the first Indian American district attorney in our state, and so I've got a great track record of making sure, you know, that the people serving you in state government look like our state, but they also believe in the way that I want to run state government. You know, and we've done this with our boards and commissions as well, helping diversify many of our boards that, quite honestly, when I got in office was just a bunch of white men on there. And we've tried to make those boards look more like us. So we're bringing every perspective with the advisory boards and other decision makers that we have in state governments. And look, that's not just low-level boards. We're talking about Ports Authority, Board of Regents, World Congress Center Authority, you know, Savannah Convention Center Authority. I mean, some of the most important pieces of boards and commissions in state government. And so, you know, Shelley, there's a lot of people that run around and say this and do that, you know, in an election year. But I've tried to take the tack of being more of a workhorse than a show horse, because I believe that Georgians are smart and voters are smart. They can see what your record is. If they take the time, that they can find out exactly what I've done and why I've done it. And, you know, I'm proud of that record, and I would urge people that are unsure about that to go look at that record. But the last thing I said on that radio show when I got that question, especially when we were talking about the voting bill, I said, look, there's a lot of people that are lying to you. And I said, I'm not one of them. I said, you know, you may not agree with everything I'm saying, but I asked those hosts, I said, anybody else come on your show for 30 minutes and ask every single question you had for them? And they laughed and said, no, they have not, Governor. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do if I'm honored to continue to serve.
I have one question, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience. A poll was recently released. The reason why we're doing this event, my brothers, is because a poll was recently released that your opponent, Ms. Abrams, is struggling with black voters as a whole, but also struggling with black men. And so I said, well, I'm going to bring my friend in front of a bunch of men, business owners, nonprofit owners, all kinds of folks, schools, principals, builders of schools, and so that's why we're doing this event. what do you have beyond the stuff you've accomplished? What is your message for the men in this room specifically to earn their vote specifically?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we're doing so well with African Americans, look, we're not taking the African American female vote for granted or any other male or female vote of any other demographic that's in our state. I mean, we have a message and a record, I believe, that can resonate with most Georgians. And so, we are taking that to those individual voters that we feel like we can persuade, because, it's the same message to the men that are here this morning. It's, you had a governor that when no one was looking or when everybody was criticizing on both sides, stood up and did what was right for you. I wasn't worried about people in prominent places. I wasn't worried about what Stacey Abrams was criticizing me on. I wasn't worried about the national media, the local media, the healthcare pundits that were, literally getting paid to sit in their basement when many other people were not, that were criticizing policymakers for me. I was worried about people like you, people that were really at the risk of losing everything they got. They were worried about their families and what their future's going to be and where they were going to go. And, I think that's resonated not just with African American men. I think it's resonated with a lot of other people. And, that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I think, you look at our record, I mean, we've given economic opportunity to everybody in the state. As a small business owner for over 35 years, I've seen that. I know how hard it is. I've been there where you had a tough time with access to capital. You had a tough time, selling something. Couldn't pay all your bills. I've had to refinance my house. I'm paying for it a second time because we were about to lose it during the Great Recession, because I was a builder and a developer. And we had, like a lot of other people, things went south in a couple of bad business deals. But, we had enough on the good side to help us fight through that. But Marty can tell you, those were not pleasant conversations that we were having. And it wasn't just one Friday. It was Friday after Friday, month after month after month, because y'all remember how long the recovery was. But that's what I think people resonate me with more than anything, is I have been fighting for them. And, for females that are out there, whether they're African American or anything else, I was also the one fighting to get our kids back in the classroom, and I took a lot of criticism for that. There's a lot of people in this state that cannot work if their kids are not in school. And during the pandemic, even when the schools here were playing pandemic politics and wouldn't open, we were funding YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs so that people had programs during the day where their kids could go get physical exercise, they could interact with other kids, which they needed, but also so a lot of our healthcare workers could actually go work in our hospitals that were, obviously facing a really strained time. And I think a lot of people realize that. I think they also realize they've had a governor that has fought in every neighborhood to keep people safe and has worked with anybody and everybody to help do that. Georgians deserve that. It doesn't matter whether you live in, Buckhead or South Atlanta or on the west side, or if you live in the west side of the state or any other part of the state. I mean, people need to have safe neighborhoods. And we have a lot of work we need to continue to do, but people can at least know that we're in the fight. And our crime suppressing unit has been. I mean, we've arrested in the last year, working with the Atlanta Police Department and the Fulton County Sheriff and a lot of other local law enforcement. We've arrested 600 people, 600 that had outstanding warrants. 29 of those outstanding murder warrants. And I'm just committed to continuing to do that. Because, the other thing, Shelley, that I think people need to realize is, as a father of 3 daughters, I know how important it is for our kids to get a good education. I know how important it is for them to be in school and have that interaction. Because when COVID first hit, Amy Porter, our youngest daughter, was a high school junior. So we saw her senior friends, kids that we had grown up with, watching them in rec, basketball, football games on Friday night in gyms all over the state and other things. Those kids did not get a normal end of the school year. They didn't get to play spring sports. They didn't get to go to band practice. They didn't get to be in robotics competitions. They didn't get a normal graduation. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see that. And I didn't want our kids to go through that a second year. You know, Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, was down there last week, and he talked about this. They kept their schools closed, I think, a year longer than ours. A year. I mean, could you imagine where those kids are now? We're now seeing the detriment to that. As much criticism as I caught from Stacey Abrams and a lot of other pundits when we pushed to get our kids in the classroom, we're now seeing what Dr. Toomey and I's worries were, learning gap losses and other things. Well, thankfully, our state is in much better shape, I believe, than most others. And we're doing a lot. And we're going to do a lot in the second term that we announced the other day to help schools have grants for kids that fell behind, but also to help get more quality teachers in the classroom. And we've done that with our teacher pipeline legislation. We're working with our HBCUs on that as well. And we've got a plan to give grants to 9,000 parapros to help them get their teacher certification and not have to come out of pocket to do that, so we can get better teachers and more of them in the classroom for our kids. And, you know, people saw that I was fighting for that when, quite honestly, a lot of the Democrats, including my opponent, wanted kids to stay at home behind a computer screen. And when I met, and this is the point I wanted to make. Sorry, I got long-winded there, but you know, I met with athletic directors and I met with teachers and superintendents, and they were telling me, Governor, you got to get these kids back in the classroom. And they said, we're normally recruiting our 13 and 14-year-olds to start getting into sports programs so they'll be ready when they get into high school. And they said, we're not able to do that because we can't see these kids. They're not getting mentored. They're not getting what they need from us. But you know who's getting to them? The street gangs are. They're recruiting them. They're 13, 14-year-olds. The gangs are recruiting them because they're not in the classroom. They're walking the streets during COVID. And so that's one of the reasons. I mean, I was listening to those people because they are literally on the front lines of that, you know, really that tragedy that we are seeing. And that's why we did what we did. Again, fighting for hardworking Georgians.
Want to go to our audience. We have the wireless mic. I believe King Randall, please talk to him after this, but I talked to him before he came up, and he did have a question. Did you want to ask a question?
Good morning. I made mention of this on Twitter the other day because I wanted people to see like why black people in particular need to be for school choice. Many of the people on that side always claim that our students are being targeted in the public school system for discipline, grades, etc., systemic racism, or what have you, but then they'll also come back and say, but we need to give it more funding. And I'm like, well, why are we going to fund this systemic racism that you guys are talking about? Why not put these children in other schools where they need to be, such as schools like ours, where we have a free boarding school. We provide boarding for these students. They do multiple activities during the week, etc., field trips or what have you, and it's all free to their parents. And we operate off no government funding, only donations from our people just around the country and people just helping us. And we're able to help all these students every single day, 3 meals a day, etc. So where do you stand on school choice, and why should black people stand behind school choice? Because I think that's something that we need to have, because there are black people that are opening their own schools, that are trying to get away from the public school system because of what's happening in the school systems. But then they'll go back and tell us that we shouldn't support, you know, other black people opening up schools. We should want funding to go to the public schools. And there are public school teachers who want to work, you know, in other schools, but we don't have the funding to pay them to come and work at our schools. So where do you stand on school choice and trying to get teachers out of the public school system who don't want to be there?
Well, I appreciate that question, and thanks for what you're doing. I think the little man wants to make some comments too. But listen, school choice, I think, is I've been a pro-school choice governor. I've also been a very strong advocate of our public K through 12 schools in this state. A lot of my friends on the K through 12 side, quite honestly, made the argument for a long time, you know, why are you going to take funds from us and give it to private schools or education scholarships and other things when we're not fully funded. So we have fully funded K through 12 formula. There was 1 year we weren't able to do that during COVID when the recession hit, but every year since then, including this year, we've fully funded K through 12. We've done teacher pay raise like I promised when I was campaigning in 2018. We fulfilled that, the second part of that promise this year. We are funding K through 12 education right now as much as we ever had. So I don't think people can use the argument of, why are we going to take money from K through 12 and give it to school choice? I mean, our state has been on the forefront, I think, of the charter school movement. I've been very supportive of that and continue to be, and I think there's more that we can gain from that. We've done school choice bills when you think about special needs scholarships, and there's been advocacy to do more. I think the problem is there's concern in rural parts of our state that have really good K through 12 systems, where the school systems are the largest employer, and politically that's been a very high bar to get over. But I do think in the future what my focus would be is trying to figure out areas where it would make sense to do some school choice, and I'm open to doing that. It's been a tough hurdle legislatively. But this is a thing I think African Americans need to decide. When you make your choice for governor, who's going to have an open mind on those issues and fight for your kids? Is it going to be me, or is it going to be Stacey Abrams? Because I can assure you she's never going to be open to any school choice, because the National Teachers Union, an organization that's not even from here, gave her $1 million along with 2 other national unions. And so they are going to control whatever she does. And I think, with me as your governor, I've had a great relationship with education. I've been a pro-education governor, and I'll continue to be open-minded and are glad to have people at the table to figure out, look, when we have failing schools, or when people are not getting what they need out of their kids, or when you have a local school board system like we saw this year, that when 95% of our systems in the state were open and they elected not to because of pandemic politics, people are tired of that. When people can't go to work because their kids are not in school because you got politicians making those kind of decisions. I tell people all the time, we were following the data and the science, and that's what everybody's telling us to, follow the data and the science. And I tell people all the time, so were some of those other people on the other side. They were following the science, the political science. But the problem is the winds are blowing different than they were in 2020. And people have woken up and they're seeing the downside of us not having our kids in the classroom in some states. And they're seeing the downsides of people's economies not being open. And that's what I want to continue to fight for in the future.
Before we got another question before Miles gets the mic over there. I do want to ask you constitutional carry. Can you explain, the attack ads say you want to put guns in the hands of criminals. Can you explain constitutional carry?
Yeah, well, old Dennis that's in that ad, the former law enforcement officer that worked as a deputy in the Floridas in the 90s, by the way, has no idea what's going on in Georgia, and if I could ever see him, I would explain to him, look, the criminals already have the guns. If you don't think they don't, you're kidding yourself. And all we're trying to do is give law-abiding citizens the ability to protect themselves if they choose to do that, and give them what they have is their Second Amendment rights. And that's simply all we're doing. Stacey Abrams, quite honestly, is having to lie about my record because she has a bad record herself or no record at all. And so, honestly, the things she's saying, like in one of those ads that said there's no background checks, that's absolutely not true. The law is the same in our state for you to legally carry a gun now as it was before, except you just don't have to get a permit from the local government. And look, I got a guy working for me right now that when he turned 21, he made the legal application to get a concealed carry permit, and it took, I don't even think he's gotten it yet, but I know at one point it was 14 or 15 months he was waiting for that. So a citizen that wants to follow the law that's prohibited from carrying when the criminals can't do that because a piece of paper from the government when they meet the background check and they don't violate any of the other legal prohibitions of carrying. Why are we not going to allow them to do that? I mean, that's just where I am. You know, I tell people all the time, they ask me about that question, they're just like, I want to understand that. And I said, well, do you remember during civil unrest when we had literally every night had 3,000 people demonstrating on the streets of Atlanta? And we were working with the organizers to make sure that they could peacefully do that. You know, during that time, you also had black males that were walking with that crowd holding AR-15s. And that's their legal right to do that. And did we have any problems? No, we did not. Because we communicated and we were honest with people and we told them what the ground rules were. But you know, there's probably also a lot of people that didn't want somebody to know they were carrying a weapon to protect themselves. And they did it legally and peacefully. And this whole nonsense about Music Midtown and other things is ridiculous. You know, that was a financial decision that they made. Stacey Abrams overplayed that because she doesn't understand where people are, because she supports defunding the police. She wants to end cash bail and a lot of other things. And so we're chasing the same bad people night after night. Well, I can tell you, our law enforcement, many of them which happen to be African American, they're tired of doing that. They're putting their lives on the line every single day. And I know that because I've been to almost every single funeral for a fallen law enforcement officer that died in the line of duty in this state. And if I haven't, our First Lady has. And so we know how hard it is out there. But we also know that people are fed up. You know, when you have people just walking through your neighborhood and breaking in your car every week, when people are getting shot, jogging down the sidewalk in the city of Atlanta, or pregnant women are getting stabbed on a walking trail, I mean, people have had enough. And all we're doing, if they want to, is give them the ability to be able to do that. And this whole nonsense about Music Midtown and her overplaying that, we just announced with the mayor of Atlanta, we're getting the college football championship game back. First state in the country to get it twice. First city in the country to get it twice. Nobody was worried about that issue. In 20 plus other states, I think it's 23 or 24 other states have constitutional carry. And so again, we're just giving people the right to protect and defend themselves as they want to, because the criminals already have the guns. And I'm going to continue to support that.
By the way, One Music Fest is this weekend. I hope everybody's going. Lauryn Hill is performing. But One Music Fest is partnered up with Live Nation, as was Music Midtown, and it's being held in Central Park, the same location that Music Midtown is being held at. So clearly, that wasn't a gun issue.
Yeah, and there's a big Athfest in Athens where we live. They got a big music festival. And
So I just want, that's my only editorializing for the night. I'm just
great point, Shelley.
Yeah,
great.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Again, my name is Shelley Wynter. I'm on WSB Radio 95.5, 7 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday.
You can advertise on that program too.
You can advertise. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Governor Kemp. My name is Joaquin Thompson, Sr., and the question I had for you is the legislation that you passed recently about making financial literacy mandatory graduation course requirement in high schools for 11th and 12th graders in the state of Georgia. What made you, or what makes that legislation so important for these young men that we're seeing here? Because right now in the state of Georgia, the African American, like things like credit score, there's a 100-point difference between African Americans and whites in the state of Georgia, and we're falling behind. And by day, I'm a loan officer, so I work with a lot of individuals that are looking to purchase homes or invest. And the thing that's really keeping us from being able to take advantage of those opportunities in the state of Georgia is things like home ownership, having a strong credit score, being able to apply for different loans. So wanted to get your feedback on why was that important to pass that bill?
Well, there's been a lot of people that have worked on that issue, and I appreciate your comments because this is exactly why we did it. I think in today's world, it's so much more important now, especially when you think about, as a father of 3 daughters, I know how easy it is for people to spend on a credit card and not know, the financial ramifications of that on the back end. And so I think just our kids getting that at an earlier age or getting it where they wouldn't get it otherwise is so important, because the thing is, we have such opportunity for people in this state. I mean, really, no matter what background you can come from, I mean, we've got great programs, even in our K through 12 system, CTAE programs and other things where you can learn a skill in a trade, whether it's welding, electrical, plumbing, heating and air, carpentry, film industry. We've seen Fulton County Career Academies. I mean, they're teaching people film, and in the same school, they're teaching people how to be carpenters. I mean, great paying jobs when you get out of school, but you need to have those basic skills of, financial literacy, if you will, so you make good decisions and you can get started the right way and have access to capital in the future. And it's unfortunate that we haven't done this before now, but I think, sometimes there's a lot of things that you think are good ideas and you work on and you get them done and then you never hear anything about it. I've had a lot of people as we've gone around the state that have thanked me for doing that and thanked in the legislature for pushing that bill through, because it's going to be instrumental, I think, for our kids. And I'm one, as King Randall knows, the last thing teachers and administrators need in our school is more government mandates. In fact, we've been trying to take some of those away. As promised, we did away with some of our ridiculous testing that was really stressing our parents and our kids and our teachers, and simply allow our teachers to get back to teaching our kids versus, teaching to a test and being able to have that quality time with them and things of that nature. So I'm very hesitant about mandates on curriculum and other things, but I really felt like in today's world, especially with more of our transactions moving digitally and otherwise, it's so important for people to have financial literacy. Plus, it's just going to give them great opportunity in our state, because, I mean, anybody that wants to work in our state right now, they can work, and they can get a good paying job. And what we want to do is get them into that position and have them have the dream that I had, to be a homeowner and raise their family in that home, and have their kids be able to have the same success that they're going to have. And I think this bill will help do that in a lot of ways.
Governor, I got a question before, real quick. Is there a way, and I don't know if this is possible, but I'm a fan of King Randall School. Is there a way for the state to help fund those kind of schools without them becoming charters? Like, is there something that can be done?
Well, that would certainly have to take legislation. I mean, it's the way the system's set up now, the taxpayers are funding public K through 12 schools and charters to some extent. I think to be able to do private schools, that's obviously a completely different issue, and that's not why those schools were created, obviously. And I think you're asking a heavy burden on the taxpayers when you do that. But I do think there's other. I mean, that's what the debate and the discussion would be about.
Gotcha.
Good morning, Governor Kemp.
Morning.
My name is Latron Price, and we own cold storage and dry storage here in Georgia. We operate about 200,000 square feet of storage space between cold and dry. My question is really directed toward the economic driver for the state, which is in agriculture.
Yeah.
And historically, actually before I mention that, the state of California GDP runs about $3 trillion. I know inching toward $4 trillion. The state of Georgia GDP is running around $700 billion. In comparing both states, agriculture is the leading driver between the two. In Georgia, particularly black farmers on a federal level generally have been overlooked, particularly black farmers, in the opportunity and what it brings to the revenue pool. Some would say the state. Black farmers are overlooked in the state of Georgia as well. My question to you would be, how would you, in your next term, put together specific programs that would encourage black farmers to be active in this economic environment? And then in addition to that, what would your office do with the new administration of the Georgia Ag Commissioner coming in to have a direct conversation with urban communities around agriculture?
Well, look, I believe, obviously got to decide who's going to be the next agriculture commissioner. Obviously, Senator Tyler Harper's a good friend of mine. I've served with him for a long time. He's I think third or fourth generation farmer from South Georgia, so he gets agriculture. But his whole family, they're also business people, and I think he'd welcome that conversation. I'll be glad to talk to him about that, and we can have him reach out. I mean, look, my goal as governor is to make sure we have an environment where any farmer, whether they're black or not, can thrive in our state. It has been tough being in agriculture, and I know because I've been in it. I'm a timber farmer. I've been in row crop farming. I've been in food products business, and some of those didn't go so well, so I fully understand how hard that is. But what we're trying to do in Georgia is create an environment where people can be competitive in agriculture, and that's getting harder and harder to do, especially over the last several years when commodity prices were down, and now that they're back up, everything else is up with 40-year high inflation, and so it's still making the numbers very tough. But we're doing a lot on the research side to bring efficiencies to farming. I want to continue to do that. We have a goal of making UGA the #1 ag school in the country, where our students have those opportunities to continue to learn and be in an environment where they innovate. I think the whole urban farming movement, we've been very supportive of that. Marty and I went and visited Calera, which is a vertical lettuce farm, incredible indoor growing facility, completely hydroponic. I mean, it's just an unreal operation. I know there's a lot of other things like that going on. And from my understanding, there's a lot of African Americans that are involved in innovative urban agriculture. And so we would welcome that discussion. You know, specifically, I think for the state's perspective is just trying to keep our business environment good, where it's easy to start a business in our state, where we have low taxes, where we have a good educated workforce, especially as ag gets more tech related. I mean, John Deere just announced the other day they want to be totally autonomous, I think, by 2035, and so we're going to see more and more of that coming. I think most of the issues with black farmers in the past has been more of a federal issue than a state, but look, I'm willing to continue to have those conversations. I mean, Omar Ali and I have had many of these with his dad, talking about access to the system, if you will. And so the Department of Administrative Services, under my direction, they're doing, we just hired a minority business person over there that's helping promote and educate small businesses, minority businesses, on how you can get on the state contract, how you can bid on state projects, just raising the awareness, trying to make the system fair for everybody. So we'd be glad to get you guys hooked up with them too, to see what other things are out there and available for that.
Omar, can you stand up? This is Omar Ali Latron right here.
I do. Governor, Marty, good to see you again. The question that I have, one of the most important things for blacks and small business is the economic opportunity to take care of our family and our communities. One of the issues that we notice in the state is that most of the contracts are bundled together. What can we do to unbundle those particular contracts so that you don't see a $50 million, $100 million, or $200 million contract? Break them up into smaller packages so that like the gentleman I met that has a concrete company, that he can go after a $5 million concrete contract, and so forth and so forth. So what can be done to debundle these particular contracts?
Yeah, I probably need to look into a little more on the debundle. I mean, I think that's certainly something I would be open to. I mean, obviously there's reasons I think that projects are bundled, and you know, the whole design build process brings a lot of efficiencies and speed, especially on road projects and other things. But that's really what we've been working on with the Department of Administrative Services over the last several years, is trying to figure out how we get more people involved in bidding on those projects, and whether it would make sense to debundle, if you will. Obviously that could create more work on our side, but also give more people opportunities. So I would be very open to that, and we'd love to sit down and talk more about that.
Hi, good morning, Governor.
Morning.
First Lady. All right, my name's Mark K.D. Boyd. I run a nonprofit called Help and Empower Youth on the west side of Atlanta. I knock on doors in my off time to register the neighborhood, because We like to keep the politicians in the neighborhood because that keeps things going, running straight, running good in
Yeah,
the
all
neighborhood.
politics is local, right?
That's right, right? So when I go knock on doors, and and people ask me my opinion about what I'm going to do for governor, okay? You're an easy sell because of the line that you've walked between not necessarily being a Trump kind of Republican, right? My question to you is, how are you going to continue to thread that needle and walk that line when we get down to, you know, coming down to the wire and you need that little percentage, and you know, there are a lot of black people open to come and vote for you. We with these policies, right?
Yeah.
But we know politics is a daggone, it's like
It's a moving target.
right? You know, it's a popularity game, right? And black people ain't going. Shelley kind of spoke to it a little bit. If they think you racist off top, you know, it's not going to be a non-starter. So you, like I said, have walked that line, right? We can sell you, but how are you going to get down to it when Trump come here and be trying to do the same thing he did last time and ruin the election? That's just
Well,
my
I
opinion.
appreciate your comments and your support, and I think, you know, look, when you go vote, you're putting your trust in one candidate or the other, and I'm asking people to trust me because of my record, not just as governor, but what I did as Secretary of State. My record as being a small business owner for over 30 years now. And you can talk to people who used to work with me. I've worked with anybody you could imagine in the construction business, from all walks of life, all races. I treated them all the same. I paid them all the same. And I worked just as hard as they did. And they know it. And that's why we always had good subs and had good projects. And, you know, that's just my commitment to people, that I'm going to continue to do that. I mean, I can't imagine getting any more pressure than I've already gotten in the last 3.5 years. I might not should have said that, but when you think about literally what we went through in the summer of 20 with all the crazy things that was happening, what was happening in downtown Atlanta, I mean, literally I was in the State Operations Center every night till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would leave and I would go to the Capitol and I'd walk around that whole block of that building and thank our National Guard troops and police officers, and, you know, that was as diverse a group as anywhere in the state, I can promise you. And they just knew I was on the front lines fighting for them. And I think Georgians know that too. I mean, look, people ask me, you know, they've asked me about Trump a lot. They've asked me about, you know, other candidates and everything, and I'm just like, look, I'm your governor. You know, I made the promise to you. I didn't make the promise to anybody else. You know, I made the promise to you. I put my hand on the Bible and took the oath where I promised to protect and defend the laws of this state and the Constitution, the laws and the Constitution of the United States, and that's what I've worked hard to do. That's my commitment, to continue to do that. And I'm going to have to trust people that they would believe me. I mean, after 3.5 years, especially after what they've been told about me during the 2018, I think people have seen it with their own eyes. I think the reason I'm doing well with a lot of non-traditional Republican voters is because they know I've stood up and fought for them when literally the spotlight was on me like nobody else in the country. I mean, that's not anything I ever thought I'd have to deal with, but that's part of it. You know, you get in, you have to deal with tough situations, and, you know, in tough times, I believe you need tough leaders. And, you know, sometimes you get in those situations and you see a lot of politicians that are like, I'm just going to blow with the wind on this one and live to fight another day. And I believe that's what Stacey Abrams and a lot of other people were doing back during the pandemic. But, you know, I didn't blow with those winds. I stuck with our people that I was listening to. And that's, to me, is what this race is all about, is who do you believe is going to really be there for you? Who's going to fight for you versus being beholden to national unions or, you know, $10 million worth of donors out in California, or $6 million in Washington, D.C., or $2 or $3 million in New York, and Lord knows what she's raised since then from those people. But that's who she's going to be beholden to. You know, I'm beholden to you all, and that's what I've been fighting for. And again, I know Not everybody agrees with every decision. They wish I'd do this and wish I'd do that, but at least the people know I've been fighting for them and standing up for what I told them I would do and what I believe in.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. I want to say something. I'm sorry I said I editorialized once, but I'm going to do it again. Yesterday you mentioned about you were at an HBCU with urban radio stations, many of them my friends, all urban stations, Ryan Cameron, Frank Ski, Young Jock, everybody, Morris Baxter, they even had CLK there. I didn't mean to say it like that, but you were there. Mostly all African-American audience, all urban audience, and then the very next morning you're here with what I thought was going to be 50 African-American men, turned out to be a lot more, and students from my brother's school. And I'm thinking to myself, as a man who has been in this Republican political game for 2 decades, myself and Rufus, and I've been on the radio taking the slings and arrows, I've never once seen a Republican go for the heart of the Democratic Party's base. Yesterday, and then the very next morning with men, I personally want to thank you for that, because that means that you simply have a story to tell and a record to run on. You wouldn't be doing this if you did not have a record, a strong record to run on. And as someone that's been talking Republican, conservative politics on the radio, like I said, been called every name in a book but a child of God, to see you doing this, I appreciate it. I think many of these men appreciate it. And I just want to ask this final question. If you came in here not sure, are you surer now? Please raise your hand if you're sure now on where you're going to cast your vote. If you came in here not sure.
You got the audience confused.
Right. If you came in here, if you weren't sure of if you're an independent, I know my brother's an independent, I know him very well. If you're an independent, you weren't sure, are you surer now that you would be casting a vote? Yep. Yep, thank you. God bless you. Last words to the audience.
Hey, if I was y'all, I wouldn't raise your hand. There's too many media here. You may get canceled. I think there's a lot of silent minorities out there that are going to be voting for us in November, because I've been honest and truthful with people. And, you know, kind of to Shelley's point, I was just thinking when he was saying that, you know, when I first campaigned for the state senate in Athens back in 2002, Marty was pregnant at the time. We had 2 in diapers, and she was pregnant, and so wonder she even let me do that. But I went to many black churches in Athens, and I met a lot of great faith leaders and other folks in the community, and other people I had known by, you know, playing with their kids and kids in their neighborhoods at Clark Central High School, both football and basketball or baseball. And, you know, I was very comfortable in that environment. I built some great relationships that are still very fruitful for me today. I showed up in those same neighborhoods and talked to those same people, you know, when I ran for Secretary of State, and I dealt with them a lot. As you can imagine, a lot of my African-American friends were calling me during the election bill, asking me what in the world was going on, because they're getting pressured, and they're getting pressured because people know that they're friends with me, and they know that they're going to talk to me. And I had to push back on a lot of them and say, look, man, this is what the truth is. You know, people are overplaying their hand. You just got to let this play out. This is what they try to do, and we got to stand up for our values. I know the bill will make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. So, you know, I've been doing things like this for a long time. I'm very comfortable in this environment. You know, I've been on a lot of the black radio stations that I was on with last night several times in the past, even when I wasn't focused on running for re-election, just, you know, sharing what we're doing in our state. And that's what I'm committed to doing in the future. And I think people see that, and we'll know for sure on November the 8th. But we'd be honored to have y'all's vote and support. But I'd be honored to have even more than that. I'd be honored if you talk to your significant other and folks in your neighborhood, folks you're working with or worshiping with, and go out there and try to move a few more votes for us so we don't have to worry too much on election night. Thank y'all for having me.
Governor. Hey, really quick, we had one more closing comment really quick, if you're all right.
Thank you. I'm a listener of Shelley, word on the street. Like I said, I don't know why everyone else came, but I was invited. I was a Democratic voter that did switch over to, I'm gonna vote for you this election, to Republican just by your policies alone. I don't think you guys do a very good job marketing the things that you do.
I agree completely.
And I think you can do a better job. Yes, and I think you can do a better job by doing so. So like I said, I followed you from jump when you made a promise to the teachers, which my wife is a teacher, and I followed your wife when she made a promises for the sex trafficking, and I watch you guys follow through with those promises. And that's one of the things that I feel, like I said, a lot of people need more of, somebody making a promise and actually following through with those commitments. And the same thing, like I said, with the young man was saying with the Donald Trump and everything else, I'm proud of you for standing on your own for what's right and saying, no, I'm not gonna do that, but I will do this. And like I said, even with Donald Trump, I said a lot of people say they hate him and this, but like I said, a lot of his policies worked as well. So like I said, I'm a strong believer of if the policies work for me and my family, those are the policies that I'm voting for. So like I said, thank you again, and thank you and your wife for what y'all have done. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. My last comment, Shelley, is try to get Melania Kai to vote for me. You think you can do that?
I think if the only way that'll happen is if I'm not there anymore. I think she's just going against me. I don't think she really has a dog in the fight, as she says. But as you know, I'm going to vote for you, and I hope many of you brothers will vote for my good friend and the man who's kept his promises to us. And I think the staff gets mad at me because I'm such a advocate. I'm supposed to be a journalist, but I'm not a journalist. I'm a talk radio host with an opinion, and I love this man, and he's never done anything. He's never not told the truth to me. He's always treated me with respect. And I'll tell you a quick story real quick. When the signal was sold at 106.7, where I used to be, they sold the signal. Governor invited the whole station down to the governor's mansion, and I was the only one to show up. And I'm almost going to tear up, but my mom and I took a picture with the governor, and the governor said, let me just take one with your mom, and I stepped away. And my mom, you know, she's older, she's my mom, so you know I'm a little off, so you know my mom is a little off. And she was whispering to the governor, and I'm thinking to myself, what is my mom talking to the governor in his ear that I can't hear? And all I heard him, all I heard this man say was, I promise you I will. My mom, my mom had asked him, please look after my son. She's a Democrat. You know, she thinks all y'all are crazy. But she said, look after my son, and all I heard him say, I didn't know what she asked him. All I heard him say was, I promise I will. And he has never not taken my calls, late nights, early mornings. He's never not answered a text. That's a man's man to me. That's what I grew up with. Men who say, I'm gonna do something, and they do it. And we don't have that many around anymore. Black, white, I don't give, you know what, about color. But this is a man's man, and he stands by his word, and I love him to death, so please vote for him.